Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the IMA Weekly Show. Tonight, we're going to take a step back, not just to look at where medicine is going, but to remember where it all began. Well, maybe not all began. We're going to look at 250 years here in America as we approach our 250th anniversary. I know we have folks from all around the world, and some of you know our storied history. But it's time to ask some bigger questions about American medicine. What have we learned? What have we built? What have we lost? And what do we need to restore? And American medicine did not begin as a massive system. It began in homes, in churches, in kitchens, sick rooms, childbirth rooms, farms, small communities. And before illness was met by institutions, it was met by family, by faith, by observation, by practical remedies, and, when available, a local healer or physician. Now, of course, we should not romanticize the past. Medicine in 1776 was certainly limited, inconsistent, sometimes dangerous, but there's still something about those roots worth remembering. Care was human, it was local, it was personal. The sick person was not a chart, a claim, an insurance number, in a portal or anything like that. They were a neighbor, a mother, a father, a child, a parishioner, a farmer, a friend. The first clinic was the home. And the best of medicine still begins there today, with knowing the person. Now, tonight is not just about the future of medicine, it's about getting back to the roots of medicine. Truth, trust, humility, informed consent, physician independence, and the sacred relationship between the doctor and the patient. So tonight we're asking, what have the last 250 years taught us? And how do we restore the roots of American medicine? So without further ado, I'm joined by three amazing friends and colleagues tonight. Joining me tonight are three voices who bring a lot of wisdom, experience, and courage to this conversation. First, we have Dr. Joseph Varon, the President and Chief Medical Officer of the Independent Medical Alliance. He's a critical care physician, a professor, a prolific medical researcher, and internationally recognized expert in acute care medicine. Dr. Kat Lindley is an IMA Senior Fellow and Director of the IMA Fellowship Program. She's a board-certified family physician with a direct primary care practice in Texas and has been a leading advocate for physician independence, informed consent, and restoring the doctor-patient relationship. And Dr. Lynn Fynn is an IMA Senior Fellow and retired infectious disease specialist, now focused solely on clinical research. She holds patents in novel therapeutic formulations globally and has developed award-winning supplement formulations used by high-performance athletes worldwide, which probably has some relevance during this World Cup period of time. So thank you all for being here. Tonight we're going to reflect on 250 years of American medicine. And I think this image tells us a lot. So take a look at that on your screen if you're able to. And I want to start with Dr. Varon. And I know he wants to reflect on this because this image tells us so much. When you look at 250 years of American medicine, what stands out to you most? The breakthroughs, the warnings, or the need to restore certain things like trust?
I mean, when I look at this image, I said, how can I go back to that? That's what I think. When I first went to medical school, if I saw a picture like that, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the doctor that would go to your home, would talk to you, would know your family, would know everybody's illnesses. I wanted that relationship. Then I met critical care and fell in love with the adrenaline and started to do that. And now that I guess I have become a little wiser, I'm going back to that medicine. I want to go back to that transparency, to that, to that part of medicine that the IMA really pushes for, that independence of that the doctor can have, not being swallowed by a giant organization that tells you how to practice medicine. I like to talk to my patients. I like to know what's going on. If you come to my office, actually, my students put usually a sign outside the room that tells, please don't gossip too much with the doctor, because if not, he will not get to the next patient. Because I want to know everything about these guys. I want to know what makes them tick. And that's what makes a difference in medicine. And that's what we're losing. 250 years later, we're losing that beauty of the physician-patient relationship, unfortunately.
Yeah, I share that same sentiment. I was dead set on becoming a rural family doctor when I was in medical school and was president of the Family Practice Association. And for some reason, pathology called, and I did too well in it, and it called me. But yeah, that image to me, just that human touch, sitting there with the patient, no computer obviously in between them. It was just that human touch. All right, Dr. Lindley. So one of the themes of this campaign about remembering and restoring is that American medicine did not begin as a system. It began in homes, families, churches, sick rooms, etc. So as a family doctor, what does that say to you about what medicine should look like?
So I am the rural family doctor.
Hmm.
So that picture, it's essentially what I do a lot of times. I have my stethoscope, my otoscope, and my blood pressure cuff in my car because I've been known to examine a patient in the parking lot at a football game. Um, I practiced at the university level. I practice for a large corporation, for hospital, and I was even director of rural healthcare clinics. There, we had three of them at the time. So I've done a little bit of everything. And, at some point you realize the system is really broken when a patient on Medicare cannot afford his insulin because the PBMs changed the formulation. And instead of giving him insulin that he's been stable for, for many years, all of a sudden his hemoglobin A1C is out of control and you ask him why, and he says, I can't afford it.
Hmm.
And that's kind of when I decided to go back to my own roots, which is family medicine, small office in a small rural town. And I fell in love with medicine again because that's what medicine is supposed to be. It's supposed to be my patient and me together in a room without this third party, the insurance, the Center for Medicare, Medicaid, the PBMs. It's really, they're not supposed to be there, but they are. And
Right.
I feel the only way we will actually restore trust in medicine again is to go back to our roots. And our roots are doctor and patient, and that's it.
Absolutely. And for those of you that don't know, we're reflecting upon an excellent blog on the IMA health.org website that is celebrating this 250 year memorial of medicine and its roots and its future. So if you haven't read that, highly recommend it. And in the blog, we do point out that the first clinic was the home. So Dr. Varon, today much of medicine happens on the systems terms, the waiting rooms, the portals, insurance rules, the short appointments, protocols. So what do we lose when healthcare becomes disconnected from real life?
Well, I mean, first things first. I mean, we have to accept that we have made a huge progress over the last 250 years.
Mhm.
We have created medicine that our ancestors could not even imagine that we could do things. We've done transplants, we have cured cancers. We really have done a lot of really good stuff, but we have lost a lot of that doctor-patient confidentiality, not doctor-patient relationship. And it's not. I'm not telling people don't be anti-medicine. Don't be a person that goes against what's been done. But just like Kat was saying, just going back to our roots, trying to be a little more human with the patients. And yes, do your science and get into with your microscope and find all the good things that you can have or any good therapeutic interventions. And more important than anything else is don't let anything be in between you and your patient. Because right now, just like Kat says, we have insurance companies, we have the Centers for Medicare that are after us all the time. I mean, it's nonsense. You want to care for the patient. You want to do whatever is best for the patient. Make sure that the patient is your top one priority. Patients over profits. And that's one of the things that the IMA has been saying from day one.
Absolutely. And to your point, look, we've made great advances. My mom, many know, was recently in the ICU for almost 2 weeks, and she's doing much better. Happy to report that. And some of the technologies they used saved her life. And so we can't disregard, where we've arrived, but at the same time, there's so many things still in between the, the caregiver and that patient. And, Dr. Lindley, in the blog, we also talk about the role of midwives, about women healers, about household knowledge, about practical wisdom in early American medicine. So how do we honor science without dismissing, the lived experience and the wisdom that the patients and family, bring into the room?
So one of the good aspects of Facebook is you can connect with your family that's on another continent. So every once in a while, like I'll write, I'm not feeling good or something, if I have a flu or whatever. And the first thing I get in the messenger is my sister message. Did you cook milk with sugar? And like you're supposed to make like caramel or something, or like, did you make chicken soup or, things like that. And we forget that for many things, we actually do have remedies. Uh, when you have a flu, a lot of people will drink tea with lots of lemon and honey because it makes them feel better. But all those ingredients have actually some therapeutic function as well. And it is, you're supposed to really take charge of your own health. And having a good cooked meal when you're not feeling good with, chicken soup and bone broth and all that, it's going to make you feel better. And having a midwife for many young pregnant female, it's reassurance. It's someone who's always there kind of cheering them on. And we forget that. So there is a place for, state-of-the-art medicine. I always tell everyone if you have right lower quadrant pain with fever, nausea, you're not feeling good, and when you walk it hurts, you might have appendicitis, you should go to the hospital and take care of that. But at the same time, if you're just having some vomiting and diarrhea, stay home, hydrate, and make sure that it doesn't get worse. We have lost common sense. And there's a lot of common sense in tales of our grandmas and grandpas and things that they've done. Another jewel of my young life in Croatia is if you have tooth pain, you're supposed to take rakia, which is like a clear liquor that's like really, it's almost like grappa.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to put it in your cheek and kind of like swash with it and spit it out. But those are all those little things that you learn from your parents, and I'm sure that they've done it for centuries. And, a lot of little stories like that. And there is a place for them, and there is also a place for state-of-the-art medicine.
Well, I think what you bring up there too is just the fact that some of those traditional healing wisdoms that we get from grandma or from the generations also brings that warmth of caring into the healing process. And I think shifts how our body and our immune system, when we know that others are cheering us on or praying for us or there by our side and giving us all these great suggestions, I think that augments what the body can do.
So let me just interact here for a sec. A few years, actually, more than a decade ago or so, I was still one of the active editors of Chest, big journal. And somebody sent a paper, very simple paper, of people with pneumonia that were being treated with antibiotics and chicken soup. And, everybody thought that they were crazy. I mean, how dare you send to this big journal a paper on chicken soup? When you look at the methods, how they did this, they looked at different kind of inflammatory markers and levels of dehydration. It was fascinating. We actually did publish that paper, and we got a lot of bad feedback from people. It's like, how dare a journal like Chest publish something on chicken soup? Well, guess what? Chicken soup has enough salt that gets you well hydrated. It has all these things that take care of all these prostaglandins that are acting up. It's a real thing. We can go back to our roots. Just do the science. I mean, why not? I don't need a pharmaceutical compound that tastes like chicken soup given to me in a tablet.
Little chicken bouillons, you can buy at the store.
Yeah.
You sure you don't want to have that?
Yeah.
Just pop one in.
Next, you know, Big Pharma is going to come out with those.
in pill form. All right, Dr. Varon. So early medicine actually did have some real harms, bloodletting probably killed our first president, mercury purging treatments that were at the time widely accepted, but later, obviously, we recognize them as harmful. So what should that teach us about humility in modern medicine?
Well, I mean, the lesson is, again, not to become anti-medicine. The lesson is to be humble, to have some humility. And remember that medical consensus can be wrong. I mean, we just saw it recently in COVID. And every generation must be willing to examine its own assumptions with honesty. We need to be transparent. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were told that there were some things that we could do that would make a big difference. And some of us believe on them. And that didn't work. We saw it very clearly. Then later on, we were offered a quote vaccine unquote that was safe and effective. Well, it was not safe and it was not effective. So I think that just being able to say, "Hey, I screwed up," that's good. But a lot of my colleagues, they don't want to accept that. They want to say, "Hey, what I did was right, and I will continue to do it because it's right, even if it's wrong."
Yeah. And I love that idea that, if it's consensus, it isn't science. And if it's science, it's not consensus. And, we too often in medicine forget that there are great ideas out there that do need attention and other things we can do. Dr. Lindley, in the blog, the physician is described, and I love this word, as the steward, someone entrusted with the vulnerable patient, with the family, with the truth, the duty to act, according to conscience and clinical judgment. How do we recover that idea, that construct of the physician being a steward?
I think there are a lot of great physicians who are still in the system and who try to do the best they can within the confines of the system. And you have to realize that they have to see patients every 10 to 15 minutes, do the EMR, put the orders in before the patient leaves. So it's a lot of the relationships have been lost because of that. And for me, going back to just having my own practice has allowed me to be the steward. I actually consider myself a cheerleading coach um, because I'm there really to give advice. I'm there to have a conversation with the patient, and then together we come up with a plan. And after you have the plan, you're there to cheerlead them on and to guide them. But you can make them do something. And this is why I feel it's very important to have the personal relationship with the patient so that they trust you if you say something. Every once in a while, I'll say something they don't like. And I know that we're not going to like it, but I know that if I say it, it's really serious and it should be done. But that can only be accomplished if you go back to that trust, if you have a relationship. And it is very difficult. I don't want to condemn the whole medical community because a lot of what's happening now is because of the system itself, right? They have to do these things so that, they reach whatever mark the system is making them do. CMS, our government is really one of the biggest drivers of distrust in medicine, in my opinion, because they're pushing certain protocols that don't really have any medical sense. Like if you have someone who has a sore throat and they go to the hospital and it's a strep, but if they have fever, then there's a protocol to get all sorts of blood work done, and you have to give them antibiotics before you give them culture. In the meantime, the patient just came with strep, and that's why they had fever. So if you did a rapid strep, you would have realized you don't have to do the protocol. So we're doing a lot of damage with some of these things that are pushed on us. And it's hard to be a steward in that environment. And this is why I'm a huge proponent of going back to being a doctor in the office with a patient.
And that's part of the reason the IMA exists, is to try to, be a landing place for those physicians that they know they're good stewards and they want to be good stewards. And, we want them to join us and join our mission and join the ethics and the ethos of what we're trying to bring, real medicine back to where it has been and where it can be going forward. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, and we're going to look at recent history and current state of affairs, looking at, oh, let's say, I don't know, COVID origins, public trust, Fauci subpoenas, things like that. So, Dr. Fynn, I want to bring you in here. You're a retired infectious disease specialist, and you're looking at the Fauci story, not just politically, but scientifically and medically. And there have been a lot of relevant developments, including, Senate subpoenas for Dr. Fauci to testify, indictments of his former senior advisor, David Morin's renewed questions about COVID origins, what the public was told, what they weren't told, So, that's a lot. But what stands out to you about some of these things? Oh, you're on mute there, Lynn.
You are muted.
I was muted, probably for the better. I tend to open my mouth. Well, I mean, there isn't a single development that's standing out to me because in 2020, I saw the red flags. I knew what was going on. So none of this is surprising to me. But for everybody else, I have to say, the Erdman, James Erdman III, who's a senior basic CIA operative. He's a professional. He's been in the office for many, many years, and he's very well respected among the CIA. And he came forward as a whistleblower, and his testimony was mind-boggling. I mean, this occurred in May of this year, and it was like the beginning of what is going on here for some that weren't quite awake. He basically said that the CIA knew that the origin of this virus came from a lab. They knew that. And because of that, he also revealed something pretty shocking, which is 5 of the 6 individuals responsible for that proximal origins paper couldn't produce any documentation revealing how they even reached that conclusion. One of them admitted to the rest that it was based on a vote. So, a hand raise. So that's how they came to the conclusion that it was a natural origin, which was insane. So his testimony was part of it. And that kind of sparked things like Morin's indictment, which was huge as well, because it showed systemic rot, right? He used his personal Gmail. He coordinated with EcoHealth Alliance, Peter Daszak. Then within their correspondence, he admitted to back-channeling it to Fauci through this secret email. And that sparked a new subpoena from Rand Paul, because initially he was going to have a hearing, and Fauci voluntarily said he would be present. And then when Tulsi Gabbard was leaving office in the Office of Intelligence, she went ahead and dropped a bomb, and that changed Fauci's mind immediately because he knew his back would be up against the wall. So by the end of the month, we'll see if he's got to show up now, and he's got to answer some really rough questions, and he can't plead the fifth, which is going to make things very interesting. And of course, there's the pattern, all the puzzle pieces of the systemic institutionalized corruption that's been going on for many years. The scientific end, which is the proximal origin paper that was dismissed. A colleague who early on said this was definitely from a lab, all of a sudden got a $9 million grant from the NIH and flipped his response immediately and said, I think it was a natural origin. There's the intelligence arm where the CIA analysts all came to an agreement that this was lab origin, but then Fauci inserted himself into the intelligence community, and despite what they said, his voice seemed to have mattered most, even though he admitted he wasn't a material expert in it. He was not in testimony said he was not an evolutionary virologist, so he was going to defer any kind of origin discussion to someone who was, but yet in the intelligence community, he presented himself as such. And legally, look what happened. The science got a preemptive pardon. And we all know politically what's happening. There's resistance to this day. There's media blackouts. So this wasn't just a few rogue actors. This is an interlocking system of NIH funding, creating financial incentives, intelligence communities being suppressed, dissenting analysis, public health officials coordinating the public facing narrative all through back doors. This didn't just happen overnight. Biden administration's 0 hour pardon, which when I say 0 hour, I mean the last second of his administration. He had an auto pen pardon that covered offenses back to 2014. That right there to me is the single most incriminating document in this whole saga. I mean, it tells you everything. They knew what was coming. They knew what the evidence was going to show, and they tried to preemptively wall it off so they weren't held accountable. But pardons don't erase the facts, and
Yeah.
they don't shield against congressional testimony. They actually compel it, which is why he was subpoenaed recently. I mean, the question isn't whether, if there was a cover up. That's not a question anymore. We have enough evidence to know that there definitely was a cover up. The question is whether the architects that covered it up will finally face consequences.
Well, and it's interesting, how many were labeled as spreaders of misdis and malinformation now that the truth is out, and many of us are still battling boards of medicine over that.
Yeah.
And if we, kind of framing this within our conversation of the history of medicine, public health had a good track record earlier in the century. Obviously, there were some arguments over masks back in the Spanish flu pandemic and things like that. So, there's always been those who still stand for, fighting, quote, consensus thinking. But, you think of the cholera pump in London and John Snow and the history of epidemiology and figuring out things, better sanitation and improving nutrition, things like that. So in terms of public health now versus where public health was, and looking at one person having an extraordinary influence over research, funding, public messaging, treatment discussions, do you ever think one person should have that much power over public health?
Absolutely not. I mean, that's the short answer. Um, you know, he was the NIAID director, sorry, for 38 years. Okay, before that, he was still at the NIH. He just wasn't in that position. His 38-year tenure was under 7 presidents. His portfolio expanded into something no single human should control. And it's kind of crazy, but you know, he controlled research funding. So he got to decide which scientists got the grants, which research directions were pursued, who was starved because they didn't play along. He held the purse strings. He had regulatory influence. He actually got to shape which therapeutics were fast-tracked or which ones got buried. I mean, this is one man within all of our health organization that had intelligence community access. That Erdman testimony revealed that he basically reviewed classified information that couldn't even leave the White House, but yet he was able to influence it. He controlled all of the public messaging, right? He is the science. He was the face of the science. So your public messaging came from him. And the media treated all of his statements just like it was gospel. And then, of course, pandemic policy. His guidance drove all of these crazy decisions from locking down, school closures, mask mandates that he knew did not work, was not effective in the situation, and vaccine policy. I mean, that's not a public health official, that's a public health king, right? That's a sovereign. Our Constitution doesn't provide for one of those. So, I mean, the real disease here is institutional design that allows any one person to become indispensable. He's unaccountable, unchallengeable, and until that's fixed, another Fauci's waiting in the wings. I mean, just with a different face and another crisis.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point that when you have a sovereign like that, then you don't have that sacred relationship that we value at IMA about having a steward and just having somebody be there as a guide, someone there holding your hand, someone there doing things in your interest, not in a system's interest. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit because, because of this recent history and what we've gone through, we're starting to see some concerning patterns. And I know this has affected you, based on your relationships in the professional sports community and whatnot. We're seeing statistics that are concerning of younger people passing at younger ages and dying unexpectedly. And so, I mean, what questions should honest medicine be brave enough to ask? And what patterns are concerning you? And how do we responsibly go forward without fear mongering, but at the same time, give the concern that these serious investigations do deserve?
Right. Well, there are a number of alarming things. I mean, there's a JAMA study that had a residual category. They called it other causes, other natural causes. So 60% of excess mortality in this age group, roughly 11,000 young adult deaths in a single year, was coded as that, other natural causes. That alone is really a medical admission of ignorance. You have 11,000 young adults for no reason dying, and you just code it as natural causes. Honest medicine doesn't shrug at that. Honest medicine asks the hard questions, right? In my opinion, these questions need to be asked. Is exposure to repeated spike protein, whether it's from any source, is that an issue? Is that part of it? Or accumulation of these harmful cationic lipid nanoparticles that are accumulating, and they keep getting more and more and more. Did we accelerate cardiovascular disease in these young people? Did we shorten their lifespans? I mean, these are really serious issues that it doesn't seem like the institution that locked us down to keep grandma safe, right? It doesn't seem like they have the same kind of urgency with what we're seeing with 71,000 deaths of young people under 50 in 1 year span. Did natural immunity get suppressed? I think all of you on this panel know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Did it get suppressed to justify mandates? Was that the purpose? Is that why? We know it's the most robust immunity. How do you, so many people were already exposed to it by April of 2020. How do you justify someone who says they're COVID recovered and force them and mandate them to get an immunization? That's really a gene product. And are we seeing systemic immune exhaustion? We already have numerous scientific publications showing that very phenomenon. We see T cell exhaustion. We see immune dysregulation. I know there was a PBS interview with Dr. Stephen Wolf. He flat out came out and said something he's never seen in his entire career. This unprecedented death rate is increasing in children and adolescents. I mean, that hasn't happened in his entire career. So I think honest medicine asks about every child who died unexpectedly. Was there a temporal relationship between infection or injection? That's important to know. What does the autopsy show? Why were there so few autopsies being done? Maybe you have the answer to that, Ryan. I don't have the answer to that. Why so few? Why were they completely nixed? And why are we seeing a sudden rise in cardiac death? Sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, SIDS-like presentation in older children. They go to sleep and they don't wake up. What is that? Young people dying unexpectedly deserve more than just a residual category in a JAMA table. They deserve an honest investigation of why they died. Their families deserve that. And the fact that this is a controversial thing to say tells you everything about the state of modern medicine. And I know we're talking about 250 years of medicine, but I'm pretty sure in 250 years, you weren't shunned for asking why or how someone died. So how do you discuss this without fear mongering? That's really tough. I think the best way is to backpedal a little bit and to say something more responsible, like, we don't fully know what's happening. We don't know, but it demands investigation.
Absolutely.
Who is saying that?
Absolutely.
Nobody is saying it demands an investigation.
And that's the humility that we were talking about, Lynn. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to be. You can say I don't know, and I'm actually just like you, very surprised. And Ryan, you probably can educate us. I remember that before, a percentage of patients that die in a hospital required to have an autopsy so that the hospital would remain accredited. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, for me to get an autopsy, the patient has to pay out of pocket to get an autopsy, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, when we used to have grand rounds and morbidity mortality meetings, if we don't learn from the past, how are we going to improve the future? And that's such an important point. That was part of American medicine, was that autopsy, was that looking at, okay, what can the patient and their tragic experience teach us going forward so we can be the best doctors possible and not make those same mistakes in the future. And so, yeah, a lot of retrospective research over the last 5 years most certainly needs to be done. I think we all want answers. And, that there's no easy answer other than there was a sovereign, as you pointed out, that told people, hey, don't do this. And people listened. So
And in the the 80s and the 90s, that same sovereign told hospitals, do not use Bactrim for pneumocystis carinum.
So I think we learn from this that we don't put our trust in one person. I
Yeah.
think that's the key. A second opinion, third opinion, fifth opinion, 20th opinion sometimes is a good idea. And so, yeah, okay, we're discussing postmortem. Let's discuss kind of a postmortem of history here. Let's maybe do a postmortem on the health freedom movement. We're talking about freedom, 250 years of freedom here in those that are blessed to be here in the U.S. And I want to bring everybody in on this question. So if we look back over the last several years, what did the health, quote, freedom movement, and I mean, it's even kind of oxymoronic that we even have to think that we need freedom of our own health and freedom over our own health. But what did we get right over the last couple of years? And, perhaps what can we do to sharpen our message or build credibility in this construct of being free to make the choices you want for your health? Joe, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, you have to start by the basics, and be honest, be truthful, listen to the patient. That's extremely important. Recognize that we don't know everything. I mean, that's probably one of the most important things. This mess that we're in right now, we brought it up on ourselves because we wanted to believe that we know everything. And, we wanted to be the Faucis of the world to go in and say, hey, this is how it works. No. How many times we have not, done the wrong thing? It happens. I mean, that's medicine. Medicine is trial and error. But what a trusted doctor does, he tells the patients. I remember years ago, we had this very young lady that had a toxic shock syndrome, and she was very sick. I had her in ICU. She almost died. As she was coming out of the ICU, one night I get a call and I'm told that this woman had a cardiac arrest. So I run to the hospital in the middle of the night and I'm like, what the hell is going on? I mean, this woman was doing fine. And suddenly I see an IV that has a very large amount of phosphorus. I had ordered 10 millimoles of potassium phosphate and she had gotten 300 millimoles of potassium phosphate. So, we resuscitate the woman, we do the whole thing. And I go and I talk to the parents and I said, look, you know what? The pharmacy sent the wrong amount of medication. And I think that you guys need to seek legal advice. And, that family looked at me and says, no, Dr. Varon, you saved her life once. And we thank you for being honest with us. And that's one thing that we don't have nowadays. People, I do a lot of medical legal reviews. You need to see those charts. They make up stuff as they go along just they dress up the charts. So I think that's one of the most important things that we need to do as a society. The Independent Medical Alliance, as you well know, has always had this basic foundation of truth, trust, informed consent, but also having that physician independence and that sacred relationship between the doctor and the patient.
Absolutely. Dr. Lindley, over the last few years, a lot of people in medicine has been reactive and we've been responding to pressure in real time. How do we shift from being reactive to these broken systems towards being proactive and building better ones?
I think, the most important thing in this whole conversation is returning back to the spirit of medicine, right? And Joe talked about informed consent. I think informed consent is extremely important. And not only do you have to inform your patient of everything that's happening, you have to allow the patients and the families to be in charge of their own health. We are making families in different states. In some states, the child has to be fully immunized for everything. In some others, you can get exemptions. We're making them do things that don't necessarily make medical sense, but they are made to do these things for whatever reason, go back to public health or, the CDC recommendations or whatever it is. You cannot restore trust in medicine if the patient is not the center of that. And if we put patient in the center, that means that the patient makes their own decisions. We have legislations in different states about medical freedom, about informed consent. Why do we need legislation on informed consent?
It's wild.
It's like when I was a medical student, you spend when you go to pre-op and stuff, you have to give them this whole list of things that are going to happen in the event it happens, so they know. Now, like informed consent it's really an afterthought, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people talk, especially medical freedom, about these parallel systems. And that's a good idea. I think we need to have more and more groups come up with their own versions of it. But you have to realize that you will never have a alternative system unless you practice within the system we have. We as doctors, we have to maintain our continuing medical education. We need to maintain our licenses. You need to maintain certain licenses just to prescribe medicine under Medicare and Medicaid. Those things still need to stay there while you're building this system that's based on trust, informed consent, and patient-physician relationship. You cannot escape it.
Yeah.
That said, the government really has to look at themselves a little. My biggest fear is, and this is why you guys know this, Lynn was at my first debut. You were there too. I think it was Tyler, Texas, when I spoke during COVID. But the reason I spoke about COVID, like you guys were doing a great job with the whole, early treatment and other stuff, but I spoke about mandates, about the possibility of government really getting involved into your healthcare. You don't want that. You really
Yeah,
don't want
definitely.
that.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
was a
because-
great presentation you gave, and you did speak to those bigger issues. And
Yeah.
I must say that was the first time I discovered Buc-ee's, like much of the world has during World Cup.
That
So
was
that was
The big orange bus.
yes. So
the
yeah,
Bucky Nuggets. You cannot be without them, and the brisket sandwich.
yes, indeed.
You cannot really restore trust if you let the big brother in the room. And I think we need to continue doing the work that we are doing in making sure that patients find physicians and other healthcare professionals who are aligned with their ideals. And it saddens me that we have to have legislation on, informed consent and medical freedom because we should be the stewards of our own health. We should be the ones deciding and not a third party that's watching over our shoulders.
Well, and I think, and that's one of our pillars at IMA is patient empowerment, to be able to have that patient be able to say, hey, look, now that you've informed me, I don't want this treatment, I want something different. And giving the patient the power to say, look, I don't have to do everything the doctor says. And shift medicine in the direction of there are a lot of good options for patients out there. And so Dr. Varon, how do we make sure that the health freedom movement stays rooted in good medicine, but isn't defined only by what it opposes?
And that's where you have to be willing to have a conversation. You have to be willing to discuss with your colleagues. I mean, this is something that we don't do anymore. We were talking about this earlier before we started. You look at how everybody's happy right now with the World Cup. Everybody's, even though you are the enemy when you're playing on the field, everybody's happy. But the most important thing is trust. I mean, we can just talk to each other. If I disagree, and you and me, Ryan, we may disagree in a million different things from a medical standpoint. That's okay, but we talk about them. If we can bring all of these people together and stop screaming to the world, you are wrong, you are wrong, you are wrong, but willing to come into an area where we can all talk, I think that we can make a difference. I think that we can make the next 250 years of medicine extremely, extremely good. But unfortunately, I think that's going to be a little difficult. And, doing things like what Kat has suggested and what the IMA suggests, being independent, being able to find other independent people to be our allies and just work together, I think that that's what's going to make a difference.
Well said. I agree. Dr. Fynn, so what's the next chapter? What should we focus on if we want to be taken seriously by patients, physicians, researchers, policymakers? Yeah, what's the next chapter? We look back on 250 years. Let's look forward. How do we restore this trust? What do we do?
I think a lot of things have to happen. I do think that certain things like the NIAID type agencies need to be split in complete two different things, funded equally, where one is just with dealing with the research and the other one is dealing with the safety aspect. We need to fund independent researchers to poke holes in what's being done. This is serious science here that is coming out as a consensus. And you know as well as I do, I've said this a million times, there is no consensus, right? This is a discussion, especially in a novel situation that we've been in for the last 6 years. There were 3 options and one was chosen and the other 2 were called misinformation. How do you 2 months into a novel pandemic, say that the other 2 options are misinformation? You can't do that. And when you have one voice deciding that, this is the way it is, and you don't allow that independent researcher to poke holes in it, for them to come through and say, look, this is what I'm seeing. And that's what Dr. Varon was talking about with having that colleague conversation. It became taboo in 2020 and even now, it's still taboo. It became the norm. You're wrong, and there are big groups of bullies that say you're wrong and you should be censored and misinformation, and they call you at your office and they bother your family. This is insanity. That's not the way to move forward. All of this, the research agenda, funding reforms, institutional restructuring, and rebuilding of trust, that's imperative. But again, that's downstream of the most important thing. The patient, their body, their decisions. We, as stewards, advise and inform. The state's supposed to protect that patient so they can have the right to choose, even if it's a terrible choice. That's their right. Or if they decide, you know what, you're not the clinician for me. There's someone I know that does acupuncture and they do it well, and I feel better when I go there. They should have the right to do that. And we have to, just like with the First Amendment, we have to defend their rights and just offer them the best advice we can.
I think you both, or all of you, bring up an important point, and that's having the difficult conversation. If we look at the history of America, one of my favorite musicals is 1776, and it's an old one, 30 years old or even older. But just watching, how they portray the founding fathers here in the rooms in Philadelphia, having the arguments, trying to form a nation, trying to decide on how things are going to be. Did everybody get along? No, definitely not. But did they have the hard conversation in order to push things forward? They did. So, Dr. Varon, you did today a national interview kind of discussing some of these things as we look back on 250 years and ahead to celebrating July 4th. What was your national message that you shared today?
Well, the most important thing for people to understand is that, we have gone a long, long way. We have made really amazing advances in medicine. But at 250 years, we need to stop and think. We need to stop and think what we've done right and what we have done wrong. And those things that we have done wrong, or we are not sure if they're right or wrong, we need to be honest about them. We cannot be going out there and telling people that therapies are safe and effective when they are not safe and effective, or you don't have proof. I also have mentioned extensively that we need to keep that individuality present, both for the physician as well as for the patient. Just like Lynn was saying, patients have that freedom of choice. You need to give them freedom of choice. We recently were talking about this. I have patients that get sent to me because their doctors kick them out because they elected to use alternative therapies for whatever illness they have. How dare a doctor fire a patient? I'll tell you, I have been practicing for more than almost 4 decades. I've fired one patient, and just because that patient wanted to kill me for real. So I think that was probably a good reason to fire them. But think about it. I mean, firing a patient, that's it's just nonsense. Just because the patient thinks different than you, why don't you just try to go down to his level and talk to him at a level that he understands? And maybe you can understand why the patient is electing to choose that other form of therapy. I mean, I get people that come and talk to me about the weirdest treatment options that you can imagine. I mean, I really have become an expert on attracting those kinds of patients, but yet I listen. And sometimes I get intrigued about what they're saying, and I go and I study it. I think that, what I said on that interview is that we need to have trust on each other. We need to trust the patient needs to trust us. There's not going to be any trust whatsoever if we don't talk, if we're not willing to listen. And that's, again, one of the things that the IMA tries to do for everybody, both for the patients. We try to help them advocate that they have a voice and empower them to have knowledge, but also for the healthcare providers, they know that they're not alone. There are a lot of others. We're a small little group, but we're very mighty.
Amen. So before we jump to audience questions, I want to close the conversation. I know we could talk for hours because you guys are all just great thinkers, philosophers.
We need to hurry up because USA is about to play.
Well,
so
that's my point. I mean, I don't
exactly.
want to go overtime too much tonight with the kickoff coming. So, one final question for each of you. And, if American medicine's going to return to its roots, what's the first thing we should restore? And quickly, we'll start with Dr. Lindley. Go ahead.
Patient-physician relationship.
Okay. Dr. Fynn.
Trust in our institutions that have lost all trust from public health to our regulatory bodies.
Dr. Varon.
Honesty and transparency, both ways.
And I'll add my thought in here, humility. All right. Autumn has popped on the screen here, so I know we're going to have some great questions from the audience. It's been a fun conversation. So Autumn, why don't you go ahead and fire away?
Thanks, Dr. Cole. We've had so many numerous lovely comments from tonight's discussion, and I wanted to share one from someone who's watching on Rumble. He said, I'm 75 and remember when the family doctor came to the house and then watched all of that caring gradually turn into a business model. This conversation has really restored my hope. So just wanted to share that because I thought it was nice.
Lovely.
A question came in from Alice. She asked, what medical school in the West would you guys send your kids to?
I would tell you I wouldn't, but that's a different story. I mean, I trained a lot of healthcare providers. I get medical students from all over the world. They are no bad schools. They're bad students. That's number one. I can tell you all the Western medical schools, they have issues. I mean, they lack things. So when people ask me, where would you send your kids to med school, I usually tell them the ones that I'm affiliated with, because I know that I can have some control on some of the things that happen. But there are no bad medical schools. There are bad students. And as long as any medical student has a good mentor, and that's probably the most important part, you have a mentor, even if the mentor is not part of your medical school, then you have a chance that kid is going to be a good doctor in the future.
And I'm a DO, doctor of osteopathic medicine, so I'm really partial to osteopathic medical schools because the first day of school, they taught us to think of body, mind, and spirit. And everything we approached was with that approach in mind. And that's very similar to my own roots in Mediterranean. So I'm a little bit partial to osteopathic medical schools.
Dr. Fynn or Dr. Cole, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think, go ahead, Lynn.
No, I was just saying, based on, like, for example, your hearing, Ryan, with the Washington State Board and such. I'd probably avoid those schools mainly because they seem to have more of a political bent than the actual science. That's just me. It's my observation. Nothing wrong with a state school. There's nothing wrong with it. Wear it like a badge. Just be very discerning. There are many great state schools all around this country, and I definitely agree with Dr. Varon in the mentor category. You have to have a mentor that helps you through all of this. They help you cut through what's really important versus what is just noise.
It is funny because, I went to a free medical school in Mexico. I mean, we used to pay $1 a year. And I did my residency at Stanford. And, at Stanford, I had people that were from Harvard, from Mayo, from other medical schools. And year after year, I kept on getting the Resident of the Year award. And that was not because of my good medical school. That was because I was working my little butt off. I mean,
Yep.
and that's what people need to understand. It's not the school, it's how you prepare. And I did have myself a couple of amazing mentors that really made me look at things in a completely different way.
Yeah, and medicine should not be political, and too much of the slow institutional creep has made these institutions political.
Correct.
You can get the best education wherever you go as long as you are curious and engaged. So
Correct.
you will get a lot of good medical information. Just throw all the politics out. We're not a political organization. We're here for the betterment of the patient. So just whatever med school you go to, just make sure you learn the medicine and then think critically and independently.
I'm facing that right now with two of my children who are exceedingly intelligent and very good students. And unfortunately, they both want to go into medicine. I'll say fortunately, okay, because we do need more good ones. And I do think they have the curiosity that you're speaking of, Ryan, that is so important in studying.
Send them my way. I'll make sure that they change their mind.
There you go.
Done.
Last question I'm going to ask you guys before I pass it back to Dr. Cole. Bob asked, do you see increasing awareness about the need for decentralized medicine? How can we develop alternative business models to support decentralized medicine?
I do see that. I see a lot of my friends that are tired of working for these big organizations and being told what to do. But the first thing that they need is they need guts to get out of that system and then do things like what Kat was talking about. DPC, start doing your own thing. And a lot of us, one thing that they don't teach you in medical school is how to open your own business. That's one class that I think needs to be taught to every medical student, because when you are out, you basically become a prey, and then these big corporations own you.
Yep.
I think it's really important to understand that we need innovation, we need pioneering in this department the most. So I do direct primary care. Some people do concierge medicine. We have direct specialty care. We have physicians who are kind of hybrid. They take insurance, they don't take insurance. And I think we need to have even more ways of trying to figure the system out. But you have to remember, in my opinion, and I've been outside of the system since 2017, so I'm kind of going on almost 10 years, you have to keep one foot in the system, because we still live in the country of laws and regulations. So I'm very weary of people who say, I'm going to totally do a parallel system from what's happening. Your patients don't necessarily want that, because many patients do have insurance or HSA and something, they want to utilize what they have to pay for the things that they need. So you have to kind of create a system with one foot in the system and 3/4 out, and create this balance. I do find that direct primary care is one way of doing it. Direct specialty care, we have Dr. Mary Tally Bowden, who is doing surgeries, and she gives you cash prices on how much the surgery costs. You have Oklahoma Surgical Center, you have one in Austin. You have all these people. At one point, they were even doing an ER in Oklahoma. It can be done, but we have to still maintain some rules of regulations. I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I agree with Kat thoroughly. I mean, unfortunately, we live in the US and the government and our system has become a lot larger since ACA was passed. And every physician since that passing has felt the difference in how they conduct themselves. And unfortunately, in order to be part of that system, you have to have that one foot in, but you can offer your patients things that other physicians don't, and that's what's going to make you stand out. Not firing your patients because they decided not to vaccinate their child, or because they won't get on a statin when you suggest that they may. If you make it very clear with either your website, your business model, or your first visit that you are there as a mentor and as an advisor and to help them make the best decisions possible, that's going to be what draws patients' trust and what draws what fuels your practice.
Well, and if you look at the history of what we're talking about, 250 years, our founding fathers weren't wimps. They had guts, going back to Dr.
Yeah.
Brown's comments, and they had guts to say, we're tired of King George and his centralization. So we need to be able to, be medical rebels and rebellious patients and say, okay, the system offers this, but what if there's something better? So I think asking the question, being able to speak out, stand up for what's right, no matter what, come what may, consequence wise, just being able to say, okay, the system's broken. We see that, but let's do something better. And to Kat's point, okay, maybe it takes some transition from a system that exists to something that's more innovative. But I think it takes the courage to say, all the great innovations in history of science and medicine came from those curious, rebellious thinkers that weren't, rebels that weren't there for consensus. They were there for truth.
Amen.
And on that note, go Team USA, right?
Go Team USA, no doubt.
All right, I'll take it from here for a few closing announcements. Thank you all so much for joining tonight's discussion.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, guys. This was amazing.
Thank you, guys.
All right, well, I will try to be quick with these. The first one that we wanted to talk about was IMA Academy. With the future of medicine in mind, it's important to remember resources like IMA Academy, where healthcare professionals, patients, and lifelong learners can continue learning beyond tonight's discussion. You can visit at academy.imahealth.org to explore the full library of courses, conferences, and specialty content from independent physicians. Again, that's academy.imahealth.org. Next Wednesday, July 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern, join us for Inside the VAERS Data. Dr. Ryan Cole will be joined by Dr. David Wiseman for an expert discussion on the analysis of the VAERS data and what it can tell us and what it can't tell us, and why honest vaccine safety conversations matter. Mark your calendars. We hope you'll join us. If tonight's conversation was meaningful to you, we invite you to support IMA's mission. We are working to shape the next era of honest medicine, one rooted in transparency, medical freedom, informed consent, and the restoration of the doctor-patient relationship. Your support helps us continue this work, elevate independent physicians, and bring trusted medical education to families everywhere. To make a gift today, visit imahealth.org/donate. Okay, well, before we close tonight's session, we're going to share once again a brief message from IMA President and Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Joseph Varon, about the upcoming 30th Annual Asia Pacific Symposium on Critical Care and Emergency Medicine. Thank you again for watching, or if you're listening to this important discussion, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joseph Varon. I'm the President and Chief Medical Officer of the Independent Medical Alliance. Today, I want to talk to you about an upcoming meeting in Indonesia, the 30th Asia Pacific Symposium on Critical Care and Emergency Medicine. I have personally been involved in this Congress for the last 30 years, and I've been the co-chairman of this event for at least 25. This is an important event that now the Independent Medical Alliance is sponsoring and has been sponsoring even since the inception of our organization. The meeting deals primarily with acute and critical care medicine, and it really this year we're going to be looking at what's been going on for the last 30 years of critical care medicine. What have we advanced? Did we learn anything from the pandemic? I mean, what's going on? In addition to that, the Independent Medical Alliance opens up the doors to all these international speakers. This Congress has speakers from many different countries around the world, and the fact that we can share with them some of our interesting topics as well as topics of debate is very important for the Independent Medical Alliance. I hope that some of you are able to attend either physically or virtually this 30th Asia Pacific Symposium on Critical Care and Emergency Medicine.